So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Talks at Google event. We are extremely thrilled today to have Erik Hall, who is a contemporary artist and the co-owner of the Hall Spasov Gallery in Bellevue, Washington, and Seattle, and expanding throughout the Pacific Northwest. Our subject today is building a modern art collection, which I think is pretty timely, and also to expand the thesis, talking about the role of the artist in contemporary society in this age of storytelling and attention deficit. And so he'll speak to us not only about forming an art collection, either as a personal passion or as a potential investment, and he'll also outline the current sort of state of the industry. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Erik to Google. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So as Cliff mentioned, my name is Erik Hall, and I'm the co-owner of Hall Spasov Gallery in Bellevue, Washington. We have a location in Seattle as well. I own the gallery with my wife, Amy Spasov. And we started the gallery in 2006. Now we're both artists, and that has with it some kind of, maybe some would reference it as a faux pas, but in truth I think it's given us a lot of understanding of the plight of the artist, and therefore gave us a little bit of an edge in doing what we do for a living. And it's an unusual relationship, that is to say that artists don't typically run galleries, and I don't think they definitely, as far as I understand, don't run two galleries. But one of the reasons that we opened the gallery to begin with was to help cultivate the next generation of art collector. And we defined kind of what we thought that was, but that was really the main mission. And the growth that it's had over the years was not something that necessarily we planned. We always just kind of shot from the hip and acted on our instincts. And I thought that was really, really important in the success that we've had, because we didn't really follow the flow of what was going on around us. And we did most of our growing, oddly enough, during the Great Recession. And we did so by taking advantage of maybe lower property values when we were looking for a gallery. But the gallery itself started in a basement. And it was a place where, for a time, we lived because we couldn't afford anything else. And as the business grew, we decided we want a street front spot, and we got that spot, and we grew out of that within a year. And today, this is our gallery in Bellevue. That was, I think we've been there for about 5, almost 6 years now. That's a piece of toast in the window. And that's also a cap gun over there. And I think that's actually a really good indication of the type of work that we want to carry. It's something that's a little bit out there. It's not necessarily a pretty landscape or something that you're going to want to put above your couch necessarily, although we do have those things. But as a rule, we want to challenge people a little bit with the art that we represent. This is the show that's up currently in the gallery. It's an artist named Francesca Sunston. We're really proud of Francesca's work, and it's been described as otherworldly. There's always a narrative going on in her work, but as such, I think it's still something that's really pretty and appealing to look at. The stories about art are really, really important, and I'll get into that a little bit. That's Amy, my wife. That's before an opening that we had probably a few years back, but this is what we really look like. And that's an important photo for me because the truth of our business is that we built every bit of it. We don't sub out when we open a gallery. We are exceptionally good drywallers. I know a little bit about electrical, enough not to get the city involved. We might have to edit that. So in truth, we labor so that we can keep our overhead low in the beginning, so that we can exist, because in this business, sometimes just existing is succeeding. It's a tough business to exploit for a living, but we've done so because we do all the heavy lifting ourselves. I have a great picture of Amy, and please forgive me, of tears streaming down a drywall-ridden face because we were just done. We just wanted the work to be over on this particular place. But we got it open, and it worked out really well. This particular photo is us deciding that we wanted to learn how to pour concrete. We'll use it in some practical application another day. So this was the question that I thought was the most pivotal, and this was a risky question for me because in truth I didn't know who was going to be here, so it might have been, the us was a weird thing because if there was just one of you, it'd be, why is this guy talking to me? And if none of you showed up, then it would be, why is this guy talking? So why is this guy talking to us? And I'm here because I want to talk to you about this print. This is a Toulouse-Lautrec print. And if you're familiar with it, it's because it's being sold everywhere in the United States. You can get that at Bed Bath & Beyond. You can get it at any place that sells prints. Its value is aesthetic and maybe that it fills a wall, but its actual monetary value and its emotional value is diluted, in my opinion, because it is so just mass-produced. And so I'm here really to talk to you about the mass standardization of this type of work that I'm hoping that you will avoid. And I want you to replace it with something like this. This is a piece by Gerard Cambon. He's a French artist. And he has land in France, acres and acres and acres of it that's been in his family for years, and he scavenges it for things to make art out of. You can imagine what you might find in the countryside of France after it's been war-ridden for centuries. You know, the stuff that he's found in particular are really special, but what's more special about it is the story behind the work. And the story behind the work is this, is that Gerard is actually a cancer survivor, and he started making a lot of these particular pieces that we call bas-reliefs, and those bas-reliefs were a story for him. And the story goes is that he would go to his socialized medicine, he was in a socialized medicine system in France where he was receiving his chemotherapy treatment. And he was in the treatment with the same people at the same time, all the time. So they became friends. So it was them looking out on the world together. And so you imagine the friendships and the bonds that you might form. But luckily for Gerard, he found himself in remission and has been cancer-free since, but he started making these. Also with things that he found from the countryside in France. But the great story here is that these are getaway vehicles. It's still him and his people, but now they're flying down the road. They're free from their cancer, and they're together. So there's a great story in there, and it doesn't have to be that story for you necessarily, because we all can't necessarily relate to that. But what we can relate to is the bonds that can form over a discussion that we have with other people, a general understanding that we gain from simply communicating, even on a basic level. In this case, we're communicating through art. Or I'll have you get this. This is something that I think is also better than a print. This is a Elwood Risk piece. And we all know Felix, you know, from our childhoods, or I do from my childhood. And we laughed at him as he dropped bombs on things and blew things up. And it's odd that the conversation in current media is almost an entertainment sort, because we look at a television and we see bombs and things exploding, and it's almost become numb to it. And so what's being called out in this particular piece of art is to question how we look at the things that are going on our television, and do we look at it as education in world affairs, or do we look at it as entertainment? And so this art has a street bent, but the story is still a poignant one. Or I'll have you get something like this. This is an example of extremely technically challenging work. It's really beautiful work, in my opinion, but it's technically challenging. This is Alicia Tormey. She's a local artist that we represent. And what's so phenomenal about this work is this is an encaustic. Encaustic is one of the oldest mediums known, and it's one of the most impervious to the environment because it's wax and resin and dry pigment. But what's unique about Alicia, and this is the technical aspect that I'm hoping people will find fascinating aside from the beauty of the work, is how it's done. She barely touches the surface of the painting. She moves this around with alcohol immersions and a torch and forced air. And so she's painting, but she's barely touching the surface of the pieces. And so it becomes really, really technically challenging in its execution. And when you step back from it, it's just flawless. It's absolutely flawless surface, and it's really, really beautiful. But if people want to invest in it and understand the technical nature of it, there'll be an added bonus for you in its value. So we're used to seeing art in a lot of different formats, and I think that it becomes the question of what is art and what isn't is something that comes up in our lives quite a bit. And so as such, we look at it with kind of discerning eyes. And I see things on the internet, and I see things in editorials, and I see things in print advertising, and they're saying that this is art. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And discerning the two is really, really important. So if you might look through, say, a piece of print advertising, you might see something like this. And there's nothing wrong with this. That's a piece of art, and I'm sure it's beautifully executed. But that particular thing isn't a piece of art. That's a print. And if you can spend money on that, I would encourage you to go out and spend that same amount of money from an artist's studio that's budding, that's new, that maybe it was something that spoke to you, and get that instead. Because this is going to show up in your house, and then it'll show up in a bunch of other people's homes as well, thus diluting its importance. So what I'd rather you do is get something like this. Works in the same room. It's not necessarily as pretty, but that's certainly a matter of opinion. But this particular piece by Chris Lieb, called Sabotaging Eden, is a really strong narrative on what happens when we show up to places. We're already fighting over the damn piece of pizza. What's going to happen next as resources dwindle? So you can see some of the relative importance of this, especially with the modern themes in the news. Here's another example. Beautiful room. I'm not sure what that is. In my personal taste, I don't care for it. But why not have a dialogue something more like this? About how technology and our natural environments are becoming so convoluted that it's hard to separate the two, and it's hard to figure out necessarily which one we want to live in. So you take this room that's still very beautiful, it still works, but now there's something that causes a bit of pause. It has the same colors, has the same general feel, but requires an intellectual response. Here's another example. So I would put it to anyone looking at this to discern that print from the pillows. So the print has the same feel as the pillows. And I had a really big issue with that, because that means that we're looking at those things the same way. And we shouldn't do that with art. So when you're initially getting into a place in your life where you want to buy artwork, I would encourage you to buy artwork. Don't buy something that people are selling as decoration. The difference between art and decoration is paramount here. Here's a better piece for you. So this is a piece by Jeff Peters. Still works in the room, but what the heck is that antelope doing in that institutional type hallway? It still works effectively in the room, but now you have cause for conversation. Like, what the hell is going on there? And why is that important? Why did you spend money on that? That might be a conversation that happens when your friends come over to visit. I know that's something certainly that's come up in the gallery. But the artist here is the story. It's a beautiful piece to look at. But what's essentially going on here is this artist's whole childhood playing out in an individual piece. And if you took time to understand it and invest in the story, you might actually find that it relates in some way to your own personal life, which is going to be quite a bit different, than pillows. But with this piece in particular, this artist grew up in an environment that was so confined and regimented, so filled with pristine white and pristine this, and even touching these things would have been off limits and against the rules in his house. So his ideas about beauty are a little bit convoluted. So what he's doing is he's showing you things that are simply a little bit out of place, but still glitzed up and act like they belong. They're almost untouchable in a way. One more example. Instead. And so what we're looking at here is a piece by Daniel Ochoa. Now, you're probably not going to want to have breakfast next to this guy every morning, but maybe you will, because you've invested in the story and you understand a little bit. And so it comes down to what you can be comfortable with. And if you understand and invest in the story behind a piece of art, you might actually further understand its value. But it gives you something to converse about over breakfast, if for no other reason than for that. Plus, it still works in the room. It's nice. So I want to kind of break away from the visual part of this and touch a little bit on the statistical part of it. And when it comes to buying art, the difference between decoration and art is that your investment into a piece of artwork is something that's going to last as long as you purchase it the right way. When I say purchase it the right way, I mean don't buy something because your friend told you it was the next hot artist and you run out and you spend thousands of dollars on it hoping that it will increase in value. If you're buying as a commodity, you're already shortchanging yourself to some degree. If you buy because you have an affinity for something, because you love it, it speaks to you in some way, your investment in it will always be safe. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't buy art as a commodity. That's certainly something that you can do. And to that point, this chart illustrates kind of the course of art over the last 20 years or so. And as you look at it, it's got a nice little pitch at the end. Now, there's certainly an ebb and flow to it that can be related to certain things happening in the economy. But what's true about art sales over the course of history is there's never been a significant dip. It's been a consistent rise. And sometimes they have meteoric rises. And what's interesting about this in particular is some of these meteoric rises are happening at a time where everything else was absolutely tanking. And so if you take a look at individual artists, this one I always thought was pretty pivotal. Basquiat is right up there with Warhol in auction sales over the past 20 years, and more specifically in the past 10. So what's interesting here is that Basquiat is kicking the S&P's ass. And so if you want to make a purchase as a commodity, not necessarily for the love of the work, that's a pretty safe bet if you educate yourself about what it is that you're purchasing. And so that is a really, really important part of buying art. Buy it aesthetically, but understand what it is that you're buying. You do it with everything else in your life. We go and we look at something, we have an affinity for it, and then we research the hell out of it. And in researching the hell out of it, we understand more about it, and then we can make a more informed purchase. And maybe not more informed so much as that we're more comfortable with it because we understand more about it. And that's kind of what it is. You have to create a comfort about the purchase that you're going to make. But art, as a rule, over the long run, is a fairly safe bet. This is a fun one, I thought. You guys also kicked the S&P's ass during the same amount of time. All right, so I did that. That's the self-promoting I'm going to do today. I wanted to talk a little bit about this thing that I've been holding in my hand the whole time. This was a really interesting piece that came out in kind of an underground paper in Seattle. And what they essentially did is they took artists and they pitted them against people in the tech industry to have a conversation to see where the gap was and see if we could cross that gap. And in reading it, I didn't necessarily see what I wanted to see out of it, which was some kind of bridge between the two sides. There was a lot of name calling in it, but some things stood out to me specifically, and this one is one of the ones that stood out specifically to me. So this is quoting, and so there's this sort of divide. It's the sort of lunch tableism of life. Like there are nerdy kids over there, and here's the art fag kids over here, and we are never going to get along. That came from an artist speaking specifically about the tech industry. And so it went back and forth. Here's another one. Money feeds art in a way. So we're hearing all about money, but it's new money from people who, instead of renting their $4,000 apartment and then buying a $10,000 piece of art, going to the ballet, gallery openings, and being a sophisticated cosmopolitan part of the city's culture, they're interested in seeing how many Star Wars toys can I buy. It's like, oh my God, you should actually own a work of art. It makes you a whole person. It makes you real and not just a facade of money. Now, I strongly disagree with that because we live a block away from a massive tech base. And we see people all day long walking by our gallery. And I think that there is a reason to not blame, but to invite. And so our job as gallery owners is to find a way to bridge the gap and not just call names. So I guess if there was a crossover that was going to be had, it's based on awareness and understanding. Simply speaking to an audience and telling them what they should see is not really the pointed way that we want to communicate with the tech industry. But you have to understand that everyone is after you guys. They want you as an audience. And it's not just in where we're from in Bellevue and Seattle. It's everyone that we talk to that's in this business all has a concern with crossing over to the tech industry and finding out a way to embrace that community and try to usher them in as art collectors. Now, so it becomes a question of interests. Like how do I create an interest as a dealer to those in that industry? And we don't know. What we're trying to do simply is to show art that speaks to us, that we hope that everyone else will have an interest in, and educate them in giving any opportunity that we can get to kind of broaden their horizon a little bit about what might be something that they could live with. And art is just one of them. I wrote an editorial piece for an online blog, and I want to read that to you real quick just to kind of surmise everything that's going on and to illustrate one particular story about a couple that some of you may be familiar with. The Vogels have always been a source of inspiration for me. It's a couple from New York. They were collectors back in the 50s and 60s. And the story that they had always resonated because they bought within their means. They bought things that they were interested in. And in doing so, amassed a collection of artwork that was worth millions and millions of dollars. But what's most interesting about them is they were just normal people. They didn't spend outside of their means. They didn't come from a ton of money. So I'm going to read some of that to you real quick just because I'm not smart enough to memorize it all. So Herbert and Dorothy Vogel were the very best art collectors, in my opinion. They purchased only what they could afford. They did not get caught up in hype. They did not subscribe to trend, and they consistently educated themselves about art by attending openings and visiting artist studios. Herbert worked at the post office, and Dorothy worked as a librarian. They amassed a collection of art worth millions. What's important here is they went to art where art was, and it allowed them to kind of open their eyes and see what was going on out there in the art world, and they became fascinated with these people that were creating. And they realized that these people were really important to kind of the city they lived in. It was kind of the lifeblood of the city they lived in. Collecting art is a romantic, sophisticated, and intelligent purchase. It is a time-honored interest that speaks largely to one's capacity for understanding. Understanding in this regard is paramount. Understanding is a byproduct of education, and education above money is the most powerful tool in acquiring important pieces of art. Beckoning back to what I said about understanding what it is that you're looking at or considering purchase, no different than a vehicle, it's no different than a sofa. In that regard, you have to understand more about it. What we're trying to get you to do is look at it a little bit differently, understand the stories, understand the person creating those things. New collectors who educate themselves about a potential piece of art will avoid bully dealers who selfishly pawn opinion for fact. Opinion can be a useful tool as long as one is knowledgeable about the person offering said opinion. Dealers and galleries should be vetted as much as the art they sell. Familiarizing yourself with galleries and dealers, understanding their qualifications, and how long they have been in business will broaden your understanding, trust, and selection of art. This is really big. You have to go where the art is, but you also have to vet the person selling you the art as much as you have to vet the art itself. If you want to make sure that you're buying an authentic piece from someone, it comes from trust built with a dealer. Simply acquiring art was the most important things the Vogels did, and for new collectors, this is the first step. Part of this step is to ensure you are acquiring art and not decoration. As all women are human, not all humans are women. Such is the case with art. That Toulouse-Lautrec print you have of the Moulin Rouge dancers is not art, unless you recently robbed a museum. It's decoration. To acquire art, you need to go where art is: galleries, art fairs, work studios. Art has paint on it. Art is made of metal, wood, canvas, and found objects. Art is made by hand, and it has a pulse. An initial visit to an art venue should include many things. Foremost of these is observation. What manner of art is it? Don't know? Ask. Who is the artist? Don't know? Ask. Medium? Do you have others? Got questions? Just ask. You're going to run into a vast array of gallery personalities. While many of the snotty Hollywood versions with very, very important work to do, many more are very happy to have you come and don't expect you to walk away with art. They simply want to have a discussion with you about it. All of them, however, should be able to answer any of the aforementioned questions without blinking. The most important thing is to open a dialogue. Don't be intimidated by a gallery. Don't be afraid to ask any questions, regardless of how uneducated it may seem. It is how you become educated. If you find a piece you like that you keep coming back to, then you have asked questions about it and are satisfied with the answer, and is within your means, acquire that piece. I talk about the sting of art. And the sting of art that I'm referring to is when you walk into a gallery or you see something that someone did, a sculpture somewhere, and you love it. and you go home and you think about it. You can't stop thinking about it. And this goes on for weeks. And then you go back to buy it and it's gone. That sting that you feel is really important. And I'll tell you why. Because it gives you a compass, a true north. So when you come across a piece of art again and you feel that way, you'll know that feeling and you won't wait. You'll grab that one. Acclimating yourself, not just being excited in the moment, is really important, but that takes time and it takes going to those places that I mentioned. When you have acquired your first piece of work, stop. Many first-timers, and we run into this all the time, want to run out and buy something for every damn wall in their house. That's not collecting, that's buying. Collectors acquire work, and despite the fact that money is changing hands and technically a purchase is being made, please remember that you buy a toaster and you acquire a piece of art. It's not just a fancy word change either. It is representational of a slow process in which you get acclimated to your tastes in art. Allowing time in between acquisition sheds light on the great effect art has on your living environment and your mood. New collectors should use this time to gauge their comfort with art and gain an understanding of the work's value after the money has changed hands. Allowing time to pass will guide you in future acquisitions and save you from buying pieces you will never have a relationship with. Learn about artists. You have longed for a way to reconcile despair, hope, hatred, love, regret, and beauty, and their work can be your deliverance. Collect art. It is how history was recorded. It will make you look smarter. It is sexier than a flat screen television. Make an effort to understand your new artwork's purpose. Make it a priority. It may take time, and it may never fully reveal itself, but it is the pursuit that will keep you interested in it. Look at your collection as it grows, appreciate it as it says more about you than you can about yourself, and it does so with a better voice. These artists are here pouring themselves out onto these canvases. The more you know about these artists and the reason they're painting what they're painting will help you equate value. So when you walk into a gallery and you think, God, $100,000 for that piece, that's insane. Maybe, but you'll never know until you find out. What is this artist's history? Why is this going on? Why am I looking at this? And why am I looking at it here? Do I want this in my own life? Is it worth that much to me? Only you will know that, but you're only going to know it if you get out there and ask questions. It's a pivotal part of our life. And understanding the stories sometimes can be a great way to equate value, but it also be entertaining. You might find out something you didn't know. And this is for Claire, that works for us at the gallery. Caravaggio was a great master painter. Brilliant. But what many people don't know about Caravaggio is Caravaggio was quite excellent at murder as well. But when you figure these things out, it gives you a story to tell when people come over to your house. Now, if you're looking at a Caravaggio in your own home, well done. But in truth, it can be a little bit more basic than that. For instance, just understanding the technical aspect of how something was created so that when people come over and go, you spent what on what? You can go, wait a minute, here's what really happened with this piece. And you will seem way sexier, way more educated because you know exactly how that piece was done. And I'm going to use this is horrible, but I'm going to use my own work as an example. Because you could look at this piece, which you've been looking at for a while now, and go, oh, well, that's pretty. But it's how it was completed that's important to me. I actually think that landscape in my work is secondary. What's more important to me in my own personal work is the evolution of the color, how it was built. And I'll give you an example of that because this is how a painting starts for me. Red. Simple layout, nothing fancy. Little blue, little yellow. More blue, more yellow, more red. Never green. And I never used green once in this whole painting. It was built color, layered transparently, one over the next. No different than how old televisions used to work. It's an old way of painting called glazing. It's nothing fancy, it's nothing new. I've simply adopted it to a technique that felt really good to me, and it allowed me to create a green that was much better than any green I could ever get out of a tube. Why is that important? Because I don't really care about much more in life than the act of painting. I want to paint because it feels good to me. And I have found a way that makes me paint the same painting over itself 10, 15, 20 times, just with different color and different opacities. The technical aspect of how it's done is important, but not all work looks like a landscape. Some work that we start to get excited about it is neon. But if you talk to the artist, he will give you a complete understanding of how this relates to the human psyche and interaction with technology in our life, and it's pivotal to hear him talk about it. Just being around him and hear him talk about it, it's infectious. And that's why you need to go where art is. Here's another example. This is a Chris Dufala piece. And this is a great narrative on what's going on in the world today. So these pieces look like they're made out of wood and steel, but they're all made out of ceramic. It's all earthenware. And it's a narrative on the fact that these things are all sitting around in a waiting room somewhere because no one uses them anymore, right? They're desperate. They need some help. J.D. Hansen, sculptor artist. If you got to know her, she might tell you that she's also a trained fighter pilot. She's never been in the military. That's her hobby. I always found that fascinating because it's a very long road to be able to do that. But what's more important about this particular piece of work, and the thing that I like the most, and what I learned as I came to understand it more, was this piece called Grief in the Gardener was about one woman's reconciliation of the death of her husband and how she turned to gardening as therapy. And so her connection to the earth was pretty literal in this sense. And if you read the story and you know JD, she tells it with such great passion that it creates a connection with this work that's undeniable. An installation piece in Seattle, Just Be Yourselfie. You could take this a million different ways, but this thing blew up the internet in our area for a really long time. And so it's a narrative on how you live your life. Just be your selfie. Do you want to just be your selfie? Is that who you are? Or are you someone else? It questions who you are. What's the difference between your real life and the life you live online? Does there need to be a difference? Are you selling yourself as something that you're not? Or are you actually representing yourself as you are? People were taking pictures in front of this all day long, as you might imagine. But that was hardly the point of it. So one of the pieces that I really, really love is from an artist called, his name's Ben Britton. And Ben is a frenetic thinker. He talks very fast. He's really exciting to talk to. He's very energetic. And one of the things that I always talk about when I talk about Ben Britton's work is that he has a way of putting his brain right out onto a piece of canvas. And he does it in such a brilliant way. And so for a minute before I show you this slide, I want you to think about a wedding. What's that look like? Black and white, flowers, people, movement, happiness, joy, tears are flowing. But it's an exciting time in your life. It's one of the most exciting times two people that come together can have. And it's this just infusion of joy and color and movement and shapes. And Ben was just great at putting it into a painting. This painting is called This Is Your Wedding Day. It's one of my favorite pieces of art from this particular artist. And when I saw the title, I needed nothing else. Yes, that's exactly how I felt. There's excitement and shape and color and movement. It just goes on and on and on. And it's like this explosion. And the whole day you're just thinking, wow, this is like my wedding day. And you wake up the next morning, you go, man, I don't remember anything from that day. Well, you don't need to. It's supposed to be remembered in this way. And Ben knows that. And so he put it down on canvas. And so the home where this resides, it's right in this entryway. So they walk in, and every day they'll remember this excitement that they felt. And that's what art should feel like. That sting, this is what it should feel like. So I'm here talking to you today simply for one reason. And I've covered a lot of things that I want to cover, but the basic reason I want to talk to you, and I have to thank you for inviting me here, is so that your home doesn't look like this. I want it to look like this. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience?
You made a number of statements about prints, but I hope you would draw a distinction between the kind of mass-produced prints you were talking about and showing, and limited edition serigraphs.
Absolutely, and thanks for the question. There is a definite distinction, and in fact, the art market now is, the last stat I saw on it was that 3% of the art market is actually being driven by the print business, and that print business is actually very limited edition lithographs. There's a fancy word out there called giclée, and that's just a made-up word. And people, galleries will toss that word out there. It's just a fancy word that was made up in the 70s for four-color printing. That's the kind of stuff that I want people to kind of like understand and know that there's really not a whole lot of value in that. Lithograph runs signed by an authorized print house by an artist have a great deal of value. They trade on the open market, and like I said, they drive about 3% of the art market, the auction market. So if you do any kind of research, you'll see that there's Warhols and there's still Picassos trading out there that were from the authorized houses, that were signed, numbered, and they have the stamp and seal of the authorized print house. So the more you understand about that, the more that distinction actually becomes quite clear. And yes, thank you. There is a definite difference between the two.
But there are artists who work in giclée as a medium and have limited edition signed runs of giclées.
They do. That's true. Let me be clear that the artist doesn't actually work in giclée. That's not a thing. That's four-color printing.
No.
So what I'm referring to is the difference between a painting that maybe, and what I'm encouraging really is that if, say, a giclée print is $500, that you take that $500 instead of buying that mass-produced print, that you go to visit, say, an artist studio, find something that hits you really well.
Not all giclées are mass-produced. I understand I understand that it's a technological process, but there are artists who I consider fine artists who work in a digital medium, and they produce, and the physical output of it is a limited edition giclée that might only be 100 copies.
Right.
And they sign each one.
Right.
So just the fact that it's a giclée as opposed to a lithograph, I think is not important.
Right, and to be clear, I'm not saying that giclées are a bad thing. I've actually reproduced my own work for a friend of mine on a certain occasion. They couldn't afford an original piece of art. I desperately wanted them to have a piece of my work because they were in a crisis in their own life, and I thought that that would be an uplifting thing for them. And so I did have one done. They called it giclée. It's just four-color printing. Lithographs are done in much larger runs than giclées even. Giclées you can do in anything you want because of the type of print that it is. Having said that, I'm not really specifically talking about the type, whether it's a lithograph, serigraph, giclée. Moreover, I'm talking about the volume that it's produced in and whether that volume was produced by an authorized house. So the distinction there just lies in the rights. Who has the rights to do it and how much were allotted and were those done well? A reputable printing house is going to do a really great job. The physical manifestation of digital art is something that we're going to contend with more and more. And I think that there's a great market for it, as long as it's done in limited runs so that the product itself isn't diluted. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Well, and I think that raises an interesting question too. In the photography space, you have the large prints. You'll change it to black and white or do a certain crop of it, and then sell it as a completely new run.
So what artists do with the reproduction of their own work, I think, is part of the artistic process. And I would never hold that against anyone. All I'm saying is that I would encourage someone that if they wanted to buy an original piece of artwork, to educate themselves and make sure that this isn't truly an original piece of artwork. If it's a physical manifestation of a digital print, then that's the original form that was presented to the public. And as such, that's original work. But when you go to a place like Bed Bath & Beyond or some other place, it becomes less art, it becomes decoration. And I'm simply just trying to get people to avoid decoration in favor of art.
I don't really know how to ask this. I'm sort of stuck on this idea of art versus decoration.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why does it make sense to put art in people's homes? Like, that is decoration. It's kind of a weird, to me, it's kind of like a weird place, a weird way for us as a society to be valuing art is to like have it on the wall of your house or something, like just you, one person. Like, I don't know. I feel like that actually is a good place for decoration because it's just like furnishing your room.
Right. I think I touched on it on, first of all, thank you for the question. And as I understand it, you're asking why isn't a home a good place for decoration? And the difference between art and decoration in that regard?
Yeah, or maybe the other way. Maybe the other way, like why is a home a good place for art?
I think a home is the best place for art.
Why?
But for me specifically, and that's the only reason, the only way I can talk about it, to go with what I know about it, and every piece that's in our home has meaning to us, and it surpasses the monetary value of the piece. It has something poignant about it that speaks to something that happened in our life or relationship we had with an artist. Just recently we purchased a piece from an artist that was really, really special to us, Cheryl Ekstrom, sculpture piece titled The Paris Wheel. It's a found object wheel. It's got letter openers that were made out of bronze as the people riding the wheel. And it's a pivotal piece and became even more pivotal to us because Cheryl passed away 4 days ago. And so art is a good place, the home, is a good place for decoration, sure. But the art that you place in there to decorate your home needs, in my opinion, to speak to you at a higher level than something that you said, oh, that looks nice as you were passing the decorative pillow section of the store. Like something that has meaning to you, that's deep meaning. And I'm not saying that that needs to be something that came from a gallery or a museum. That can simply be something that you saw after you just had a heart-wrenching moment that was laying by the side of the street, a stick. Put it up in your house, decorate it some way, and when you look at it, let it remind you of something that was important to you. That's all I'm saying. Just please try not to equate those things that you see in a store next to decorative pillows or glasses as something that's going to be meaningful to you in the long run. That's decoration. That stick, in my opinion, because it has a value that's bigger than the cost, is now art. Does that make sense?
And also, it's a question. Should the art be publicly on display? Are you preventing people from seeing it by it being in your house, like just taking away many great works of art are in private collections, much to the consternation of the people that go to museums.
Right. That's a question that comes up a lot in our industry, and there's a lot of dialogue going back and forth on it. I am a subscriber, and I firmly believe, like many in our industry do, that artwork is borrowed. You don't own it. You rent it almost. You pay for it. You have it. But you have a lifespan that pales in comparison to a piece of art. And that's why art winds up in museums or in estates that's passed on through families and eventually winds up, hopefully, taken care of and in a public space. But the reality of it is that some pieces do go unseen for hundreds of years. And that's why when a piece does kind of surface again, it becomes such a big deal in our community. But I'm a firm believer, and many of us are, that artwork is simply borrowed. I know all of our artwork will be eventually given to someone else. And I'm hoping that we do well enough in life that we're able to set up a public space for that collection to be viewed. If for no other reason, so that I can feel that someone else might feel what I felt when we purchased that work.
Do you think there's such a thing as bad art?
Definitely.
What makes something bad art?
There's two ways to answer that for me. One of them is a technical aspect. I'm a painter myself, so I look at art and I'm very discerning about it. I think it's a great question because understanding good from bad might be the very thing that saves your investment if you're buying as a commodity. So that's why I say don't ever buy as a commodity, because you're safe. Even if it's a bad piece of art, you like it, you love it, and therefore its investment is safe. Having said that, technically speaking, and I'm still learning to look at, say, abstract art, for instance, but I can recognize things very specifically now about abstract art that lets me know that this is a new painter. And I'm not going to say it's bad, I'm going to say it's new. It's someone that needs to progress a little bit in their career. And part of the gallery's role is to be a really great filter for the public. so that the trust can be developed over time, where you know that we've already vetted a lot of this art for you. You vetted us over time, we vet the art constantly, and that way when you come in and you have that visceral response to something, then you know that it's safe. You could buy this, it's been vetted. Now, it's been vetted through us. The world doesn't agree on this, but we do. And if you trust us, that kind of helps it out a little bit. But technically speaking, like with an abstract painting, there'll be muddy parts in it. And by muddy, I mean where things happened while the paint was wet and it turned this kind of brown color, and the composition was kind of poor. I'm a big believer in the rule of odds. Paintings being dissected into thirds as a way to kind of present them in a way that gives you a center line when you look at it. There's a bunch of little things. Sometimes, for me, it's just the technical aspect of it. Painting can be great, but I think that if there was a painterly mark in it that just didn't sit well with me, that to me is going to make it bad. But bad is kind of a tough word. I like to, and most of the time I come across what you're calling bad artwork. It's just new artwork, someone that needs to develop a little bit more. We see it all the time. And instead of telling people no, we always try to take that opportunity to coach them up a little bit. Sometimes it's tough love, but that helps them evolve. So that eventually what that bad art is becomes really good.
I had another question too about the role of sort of names and supply and demand in the expanding internet age. You have deviantart.com. Anyone can throw up a piece of art. They get the likes on it and the popularity. But at the same time, if you were to ask somebody on the street, name a really great sculptor or visual artist or glass artist, there's only a few names and it's a crowded space. How does that evolving as the years go on?
Well, first of all, I love the internet as a medium to promote artwork. I think it's a really, really tough space in life. It's a tough occupation to exploit for a living, first of all, for anyone that's in it, on any level of it. And it favors the few. And so the people that kind of rest in the middle and the bottom are always kind of scraping along. I mentioned earlier that sometimes just staying in the business is succeeding in the business, and that's kind of what I mean by that. So the question of say places like DeviantArt, great landing spot for people that can get an opinion on something. But those places are really no different than any other platform that we use to promote. Either it's not art, whether it's ourself or our vacation or our kid. These are all places for people to go and kind of form an opinion. The more places you see it, the better. The broader the audience gets. And I think for that reason, those platforms are really super successful. And I personally don't have a problem with them, even though I'm in the business of selling art. I think that a broad awareness of art in general, in all of its forms, is really, really important and becoming kind of a lifeline, financial lifeline for many artists. You sell a few paintings here and there and keep that studio rent paid.
And how do you guide people towards the lesser known names, like things that aren't household names, as they walk into your gallery?
We get personally excited about a lot of different art, but the gallery represents 30 artists, and we're really excited about them. And not all of them are household names. Matter of fact, few of them are household names, but that's the goal. We're trying to make them household names because we feel strongly about them, because we've vetted them, because we've been to their studios and we see how they paint, because we understand what it means to them. It's not just painting to make money. They're not producing a product. They're producing a piece of themselves. It's important. They would do it even if they didn't get paid for it. When it comes to putting those artists in front of people, I don't ever get more passionate than that. I really want people to feel it, and it's got to start with me as the dealer. But those artists still need to be properly vetted. We need to understand what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. It helps us equate value to it and make sure that we set the market right. One of the things we do with those artists is we help them kind of life plan. I am coming to you today. I don't have a college degree. I learned what I learned the hard way. I found my way into art in the most oddest of paths. I come from two military people. My dad was in the Navy, my mother in the Army. Their ideas about art, although not their fault, were limited. And so I had to kind of fight my way into it. There's a misperception about us as gallery owners that we're silver spoon kids, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Military family, both of Amy's parents are educators. And there's not a lot of money in those occupations, but what we try to do is go about what we can using kind of two basic principles, just hard work, I have a saying that I use, and it's spend what you have. If you have time, spend time. If you have money, spend money. Well, in the beginning, we didn't have any money. So we spent time. We built all of our places. We have a little bit more money now, so we invest in art. We'll buy a piece every once in a while. But, and I'm deviating a little bit, but the question specifically was, getting those new artists, get them to be household names. And in truth, I'm hoping that all of our artists can be that way. And I'm a big fan of putting my stamp on them once I believe in them. But it takes me a while. And we've been wrong before, if I'm being perfectly honest. We've brought art in that we thought was really, really great, only to find out that it was missing parts. There was something wrong with it, ultimately, whether it was a technical aspect or a discrepancy just with the artist's intentions. And we've let those artists go very quickly. I have no problem with cutting that tie because I owe that to our collectors. It's roundabout, kind of wordy answer, but that's where we're at with that one.
So thank you very much for speaking at Google. Thanks.
Thanks.